Joining me now is Andersen Capital Management Chief Investment Officer, Peter Andersen. Peter, great to see you. Thank you so much for being here. What do you make of this rally underway in NASDAQ, and what are you expecting from the Fed this week?
Well, first off, I'm thinking the Fed is, of course, not going to make any changes, Maria, but I also think they might insert a little bit of a narrative about, hey, not so fast. Everybody's thinking that there's going to be a rate cut in the near future, and I think they're actually going to imply we're putting on the brakes with that concept and just stand by. We have to wait and see for more data before we make any directional decision. And in terms of the NASDAQ, I think it's all about NVIDIA, Supermicro, the conference that's happening, that's beginning today. All eyes, including my own eyes, will be on that because we're going to be watching and listening for any little change that NVIDIA makes, because NVIDIA is such a focus, along with Supermicro, too.
Yeah, I'm going to get to that in a moment. I want to go back to the Fed for a second before we move on to NVIDIA, because I think you're spot on in this whole idea that the Fed is going to start cooling things down here, because there has been this expectation of all these rate cuts. And then in the middle of all of that, we get a hotter than expected inflation reading last week. And right after that reading, the CPI and the PPI came out. I spoke with Jim Grant, the editor of Grant's Interest Rate Observer, always a great observer of these markets. And he surprised me with his commentary, because he said, look, with this kind of inflation, the Fed may very well signal it's not done raising interest rates. Listen to Jim Grant with me last week on this program. Watch. You're not expecting a cut in rates anytime soon.
No, they might decide that 3-ish is fine. They might
3% inflation.
Yes, it's concern over the inflation and to focus on financial stability as they would define it. So, but however, I think there's also a chance, Maria, this year that the Fed raises if they are confronted with an accelerating rate of inflation. They might feel they have no choice. And who's to say that the 3.2% thing couldn't go up? We have an $80 oil price, no longer 70.
Well, that's pretty extraordinary to hear him say that. And, you know, let's not forget, we've got oil prices, which is really the bulk of the inflation picture, staying elevated. Is that why the 10-year this morning is at 4.3%?
Well, I also think that people, and I'm glad if this is happening, that people are actually saying, hey, maybe we're too optimistic about how soon inflation has been killed and that the Fed is going to lower rates. Maria, I mean, I've never been in that camp. For the past year and a half, I've thought once the Fed is done raising rates, they have to at least let this play out. Let it relax a little before they make changes. But I don't agree with him that the Fed might move the goalposts in terms of what their target inflation rate is. I mean, if they did that, that would be quite monumental, wouldn't it? In terms of they're saying, hey, maybe we had this wrong for the past 10 years.
Yeah.
So I think what they're going to say is we're going to be watching this. And I also don't think inflation is killed yet, because as you said, we've seen some really warm numbers, not hot, but warm numbers over the past week. And it would be crazy for them, I think, to take any action right now because there's not enough data.
Well, by the way, energy is up. Crude oil right now is at $81 a barrel. So we're back up to 81. Let's talk about this euphoria around NVIDIA and all of these AI stocks. NVIDIA up again this morning. Company is kicking off that annual AI conference that you just referred to. The stock is at $900 again. It is up 2.5%. We're looking at all-time highs here. But there's another chip maker, actually, that's having a better year than NVIDIA. And you mentioned the name Supermicro Computer has quadrupled, more than quadrupled its value in the past year. Supermicro will be set to join the S&P 500 today, Peter. And so that's why that stock is up again this morning as well. Your thoughts on Supermicro, NVIDIA, and you said you've got all eyes on this AI conference today as well.
Maria, I have been a big fan of NVIDIA. I just looked back. I bought NVIDIA $20 a share in 2015. And
wow.
Yeah, and never looked back. Never. And back then, people thought I was crazy because they hadn't heard of NVIDIA. And of course, now everybody has. But I just want to add this. This isn't very analytical, but I think you'll appreciate this. I was driving home from an interview the other day, and I was listening to a local talk radio station that only covers politics and sports, and somebody called in and mentioned Supermicro stock to the anchor, and it was so
funny.
out of context. It reminded me of that old saying, when the shoe shine person actually starts talking about stocks, it's time to sell. I'm not saying it's time to sell, but that is how popular and pervasive these stocks are, that everybody is talking about them. Of course, that gives you a little bit of pause as to saying, is this a bubble? Or is it a deserved, well-deserved rally? I still think it's a well-deserved rally, but we're all so careful to make sure that when NVIDIA has this conference today, that they do say very, very positive stuff. If they don't get very, very positive, there will start leaking in a little bit of doubt. And that, of course, can threaten the stocks.
No, bottom line, there's not a lot of room for error in any of these stock market performers. That's true. Peter, great to see you this morning. Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
All right, Peter Andersen joining us. Your morning mover this morning.